Wait, Jack. Jack halted for a moment and said, "You got the wrong person. I don't know you, and I'm not from the Alfonso family. Furthermore, I didn't agree to the engagement. So, I hope you can forget about what happened 2 days ago. You don't know me, Jack? Or is it that you're pretending that you don't know me?" Feeling frustrated from how Jack was treating her, Wendy shouted. Jack looked at her again and asked, "Was I supposed to know you before?" According to his memories, there was absolutely nothing that he could remember about this lady. Not her name, voice, eyes, figure. Nothing about her was imprinted in his mind at all. Wendy's eyes reddened the moment that she saw that Jack was serious about it. She bit her lips and stared into his eyes. Jack didn't shy from her gaze at all and waited for her response. "We met a year ago. I was just about to be killed in an accident if you hadn't pulled me back and saved me." Wendy said these words with hope shining in her eyes, hoping that Jack would remember her if it was true that he'd forgotten about her. Jack began recalling all the memories from the previous year. Now that his mind had been strengthened, he could remember a lot of things that had happened in the past. Although they were not as clear as the new memories as the ones that he'd gotten since he became strong, his ability was good nonetheless. After recalling, he couldn't find any case where he saved someone. No matter what he thought about, he had never saved anyone from an accident. He shook his head as he replied, "I'm sorry, lady, but maybe you mistook me with someone else. After all, I don't remember saving anyone till this day." That was the fact. Jack had never been in a situation where he was made to save a person. Although if he could save someone currently he would, that didn't mean that he could save everyone. Upon hearing Jack's denial, Wendy almost burst into tears at that moment. She had been in love with Jack ever since she remembered him saving her. On that day that she had been saved, she was too shocked to react by searching for Jack. In the end, she only came back to Crystal City after a month and began looking for Jack. Then, after over 3 weeks of effort, she finally managed to find him as his blue eyes and silver hair were unique. Although she had barely seen his face at that time as she was in a daze, she could still remember that he was handsome. After finding Jack, she decided not to approach him. She began thinking of a way to thank him when she suddenly had an idea. She decided that she would marry him to thank him. Although she was thanking him for saving her life, she was also a little selfish as she had already fallen in love with Jack. After going back to the capital, she began planning on how to let her grandpa know that she wanted to marry Jack. She had seen that he wasn't someone rich at all, and to her family, they cared the most about the background of the one that married into their family. So, she wasn't sure how she could convince her grandfather to allow her to marry Jack. In the end, she remained like that, planning till 2 weeks ago. The more time passed, the more she continued loving him, and she would sometimes sneak to Crystal City just to see him. 2 weeks ago, she couldn't help it but ask her grandfather. Just like she had expected, her grandfather had refused. In return, she got angry at him and claimed that if not Jack, she definitely wouldn't marry anyone else and would stay like that. Feeling helpless, Alton investigated Jack. After finding his information, other than the fact that his background was low, there was not a problem with him. And that was the exact reason as to why he allowed the engagement. Now, they were engaged and the fiancé that she had been looking forward to meeting and talking to, waiting for their marriage, was looking at her like a stranger. He couldn't remember anything about her at all. This made her heart both sad and regretful. She wished that she should have met with Jack during the times that she had been coming to Crystal City. In that way, they could have gotten familiar with each other in advance. But now wasn't too late as their marriage was going to be in a year, 2 months from now. She still had a whole year to make him take her as his fiancée. As for the case where he was claiming that he was no longer a member of Alfonso family, she knew that her grandfather wouldn't agree to the case where the engagement that he himself had proposed was broken. With his character, he would definitely have Jack marry her even if they had to tie him with ropes on the wedding day so that he wouldn't run away. As she thought of this, determination surged through her eyes as she at Jack's departing figure. "I'll make sure that you'll love me just like how I love you. Since we're engaged already, there's no way that the engagement will be broken." Seeing that Jack was leaving, Angie was the first one to approach Wendy. She looked at Wendy's determined eyes and asked curiously, "What have the two of you been talking about?" Wendy looked at her and said with some hints of dissatisfaction, "If we wanted you to know, would we have moved far from you? Angie. Collins, on the other hand, had been observing the two from the moment that they walked into the distance. He had been observing their body movements as well. From the way that he could see it, it seemed that Jack was the one that was forcing Wendy. Wendy had tried making him give up on the issue of their engagement, but Jack became aggressive. Although they were a distance away, the underground parking lot was well lit. As a result, he could still make out some of the facial expressions as long as they were major. He had seen the way that Wendy became saddened and when she was about to cry. Then, her determination. Everything was well and correctly translated to him, and there was nothing to hide from him. The determination that Wendy had shown when she clenched her fists, it should be that she was determined to destroy the engagement. And from the fact that she was keeping this from them, it was obvious that she didn't want them to interfere. But he definitely would interfere and make sure that her dream was fulfilled. He would make sure that Jack gave up on her. But that would be done in secret as well. Neither Jack nor Wendy had no idea about what Collins was planning. Had they known, Jack would surely have nodded in appreciation and encouraged him, while Wendy would have definitely wanted to kill him. Later that evening, the arena was full. The crowd here today was definitely higher than the one that was there the previous day. Today was when there was going to be the finals. So, they had to make sure that they watched it. On the other hand, there were many bosses that had come here on this day that hadn't been there the previous day. And just like the spectating crowd, these bosses liked watching the thrilling matches, and that could only be found during the finals. Jack was already in the locker room. On this day, he'd come with Edwin. Edwin had picked him up, and Jack didn't refuse him and came with him in Edwin's car. In the locker room, there were only 8 people. There was the guy called Scarred Tiger, the one that had been sent by Austin to cause trouble for Jack to ensure that Jack wouldn't win. There was the defending champion, Mad Lion, who wasn't muscular as Jack had expected, but a man with moderate muscles, was also here. Vulture was here too, and Gibby were here as well. In other words, the defending champion, the runner-up, and the second runner-up of the previous championship were here today. Then, Jack and 3 others that had qualified for the quarterfinals were present. Each and everyone in the room was having their own space, not disturbing the other. But even so, Jack could feel the gazes that were landing on him. What's more, Jack could feel a gaze that had a faint killing intent directed at him. There was no need for him to guess who it was that was looking at him, considering that Scarred Tiger still had a grudge against him. But Jack ignored it as he wasn't in the mood to waste his time on someone like him. But once they met in the ring, he would surely make sure that the killing intent was dispersed into a thin air using his fists. The first round, in the quarterfinals, Scarred Tiger, Gibby, and the other 3 would have to fight for a single spot into the semifinals. Jack wasn't sure how that round was going to be, but he was sure that they must have a plan for it already. In the semifinals, the winner between the 5, Jack, Mad Lion, and Vulture, and 10 runner-up would fight for the spot into the finals. The 2 winners would then fight and determine the winner between them. And just like that, the championship would be over. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the second night of July's Ultimate Championship. I, as the host tonight, can tell you that I'm excited and anticipating for the matches tonight. But, although I'm the referee, I'll just watch the match from out of the ring. I hope you don't blame me as the matches are so thrilling and that they scare me. But, let's put all that aside and let the quarterfinals begin. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the second night of July's Ultimate Championship. I, as the host tonight, can tell you that I'm excited and anticipating for the matches tonight. But, although I'm the referee, I'll just watch the match from out of the ring. I hope you don't blame me as the matches are so thrilling and that they scare me. But, let's put all that aside and let the quarterfinals begin. Let's start with the rules of the quarterfinals. The way of losing the match is still the same. But please, even if you lose the match, don't wait till you die. Anyway, all the matches are going to take place today. So, while fighting in the quarterfinals, you better make sure that you're in a good condition to be able to fight in the semifinals. Of course, you'll be given enough time to recover before fighting. But, if you're gravely injured, we can only say sorry to you. Now, the quarterfinals will be best of 5. The 5 contestants will enter the ring and compete. The one that wins will enter the semifinals. And, while he's resting, the first match of the semifinals will start. If the one that won the quarterfinals happens to be selected by the randomization computer, we definitely will allow him to rest. But the ones that were not selected would fight first. 30 minutes after their match, the other round of semifinals will begin. So, I hope that the time that you'll be given would be enough for you to rest your muscles for the semifinals. It was always hard for those that were participating and hoped to be the champions. The rules of the championship favored those that managed to reach top 3, more so the champion and defending champion. Even so, there was always a reward for a person that managed to reach the finals and win, if he had not been given the privilege like Mad Lion and the other two. Most of the fighters are always encouraged by the rewards, and that was the exact reason as to why some fought till they ended up dead. Nevertheless, those were the desperate ones that really needed money and had no other ways out of the situation that they were in. Let the quarterfinals start. Those making the bets better start placing the bets. As you can all see, there's no need for the selection to be done. There are already 3 people that have a spot in the semifinals. So, you should know the remaining 5 and their abilities as none of them is a noob. Scarred Tiger, Gibby, and the other 3 went to the ring. As he left, Scarred Tiger gave Jack another glance before leaving with a snort. This round was going to be intense as it was an elimination match. There were 5 contestants for a single spot, but there were some things that always happened in such a match. They would form teams to eliminate the others, or they would fight solo. But the ones that fought solo would definitely be the first ones to be eliminated. Another thing that happened was that the others always formed a team to target the strongest person present in the ring. Then, they would start fighting amongst themselves to find the one that would qualify for the next round. Scarred Tiger and Gibby gave each other a knowing glance. Then, they turned and faced the other 3 fighters that were in the ring with them. There was no need to talk as it was obvious that the 3 would team up to eliminate Gibby and Scarred Tiger. Both Gibby and Scarred Tiger had managed to reach the semifinals in the previous championship. On the other hand, this was the first time for the other 3 to reach the quarterfinals. As soon as the going rang, the 5 made their moves. They attacked without holding back with the intention eliminating the other party as fast as possible. The lesser injuries they sustained, the better their chances would be in winning in the semifinals. Although Jack wasn't interested in the matches, he still decided to watch the match. There was no harm to watch the match to pass time, as there was nothing that he could do. None of the 2, Vulture or Mad Lion, spoke to him, and Jack had no intention of talking to them either. He simply waited for his round while watching the 5 in the ring. Although Gibby and Scarred Tiger were facing 3 people, they were not at a disadvantage at all. In fact, they had an advantage, though it wasn't that big. As the fight went on, the advantage of the fighting experience began showing. Gibby and Scarred Tiger began taking advantage of the mistakes that the 3 made to make heavy blows that injured them. On the other hand, although they also got attacked, the injuries that they sustained were superficial. And in about 30 minutes, the 3 were eliminated one after the other. And now, the 2 of them faced each other. Although they were injured, the injuries didn't affect their combat capabilities. Just as Jack and the crowd expected that a fight would erupt again, they were disappointed and flabbergasted by what happened next. "I surrender." Gibby's voice was loud enough to reach the ears of everyone present. For a moment, everything came to a pause before the crowd erupted. "What the F***CK are you doing, Gibby? I just bet on Gibby, and now you're telling me that you're going to surrender without fighting? I can't accept this. I want my money to be refunded. There must be some strings that have been pulled here." If he knew that he was going to surrender, why on earth did he get in the ring? To help Scarred Tiger win? Just shut up there. Don't you see that this is a tacit understanding between the 2? If they want to have a chance of winning in the semifinals, they have to choose one between them. Of course you'll say that because you placed a bet on Scarred Tiger. I don't think I stopped you from doing that, right? I'll kill you this moment. The chaos that had erupted was so intense. But this wasn't to be unexpected, as the way that the match had ended was definitely not the best way. At least they could have pretended to fight for a while before one of them gave up. But surrendering only after he had eliminated the other 3, that could already prove that the 2 must have come to an agreement before the match. The crowd wasn't the only one that was complaining about this. In the VIP room, the bosses there were cursing incessantly. On the other hand, Edwin frowned as he looked at Austin, who was currently having a smug smile on his face. He immediately knew that this must be something that he had planned. Considering that he'd bet with Jack, it was obvious that Austin would look for methods of making Jack lose the fight. He asked, "Is this what you've planned, Austin?" His mood was gloomy. He already knew that this was the first part of the plan that Austin has made. There must be other tricks involved. Edwin could also understand why Austin would go to this extent. In any case, if he lost the bet, he was going to lose 90% of his wealth. That was not something that someone that had worked hard to gain would easily agree to. The smile that was originally on Austin's face immediately froze. He gloomily looked at Edwin and asked, "What do you mean by that? Are you trying to slander me?" "What's slander? You're trying to deny it even after that smile on your face a moment ago could speak all the words that have to be said?" Edwin asked back. He would have wanted to inform Jack that there was a scheme in the matches. But there was no way that he was going to inform Jack about it, considering that Jack was already in the locker room, and there was no way that he could contact him. He let a sigh and decided to put the matter aside. At the same time, he just hoped that Jack wouldn't be in trouble and would be able to notice that there was something wrong with the way that this match ended. Although the commotion was high, the host managed to calm them down. The crowd also knew that the one that owned the arena wasn't someone that they could go against. So, although they were dissatisfied, they didn't dare to cause trouble. But, in their hearts, they had already sworn that they would definitely beat up that guy called Gibby. Since he was able to get the third place in the last championship, most of the people had placed their bets on him. In the end, he had surrendered, and that was before he even began fighting with Scarred Tiger, who had been defeated by him in the previous championship. So, no matter what, they had decided that they were going to beat him up. More than 3/5 of those that placed their bets had placed the bet that Gibby was going to win. In the end, he made them lose their money in such a stupid manner. Since the quarterfinals have ended, let's make the draw for the semifinals. As the host spoke, he gazed towards the screen projection that had already began showing the names of the 4 participants. When the random selection was completed, the host shouted, "Our first match will be Mad Lion against Vulture. Since the quarterfinals have ended, let's make the draw for the semifinals." As the host spoke, he gazed towards the screen projection that had already began showing the names of the 4 participants. When the random selection was completed, the host shouted, "Our first match will be Mad Lion against Vulture." These words immediately made the crowd even more spirited. They knew these two as they had been fighting in this arena for over a year now, and the winner of the first place always alternated between the two of them. The two walked out of the locker room one after the other. The moment that they reached the arena, the crowd's cheering became even louder than before. Most of the spectators were looking forward to a match that would surely sweep away their disappointment. If the same thing as the one that had happened in the match between Scarred Tiger and Gibby repeated itself, there would surely be something happening. And that something would definitely be more than just shouting and complaining. Jack, on the other hand, couldn't help but wonder if it was just a coincidence, or the heavens were looking forward to the time that he would be beating Scarred Tiger. Since Mad Lion and Vulture were going to fight for a spot into the finals, it was natural that Jack would go against Scarred Tiger. Anyway, with Jack's current strength, there was nothing that could stop him from teaching someone that there was always someone ahead of you. Refocusing on the match, after the betting session ended, the gong rang and the fight immediately began. Both Mad Lion and Vulture didn't move and continued staring at each other. They stayed in such a manner for over 2 minutes till the crowd began getting impatient with the way that the duo were looking at each other. "What the F***? Don't tell me that there's a problem with this match as well. What are you two doing down there? Start fighting already. We didn't pay to come and watch this nonsense. We came here to watch a fight. You two, what's up with your gazes? Are you going to fight or not? Believe me, if you don't start fighting at this moment, I will come down there and make you fight me. What nonsense are you spouting? You're always beaten up by your wife, and now you're trying to prove your dominance here. F***CKU. Do you think it's like before? Nowadays, I tamed my wife. I'm the lord of the Ho-dash. Pa. What lord of the house? You dare to say that you tamed me? Let's see how I deal with you when we get back home.
Vuvififi. E.
I am sorry, all right? I was just joking, yes, just joking. Humph. Ha 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 ha. The crowd chattered nonstop, but they didn't know that there was something that was going on in the ring. Mad Lion and Vulture looked at each other, and there was some kind of competition in their eyes. After a long while of ignoring the spectating crowd, they finally began fighting. Their attacks were fierce with the intention of winning with a single blow. Kicks and punches flew from left and right as the two fighters kept on moving. The crowd had already stopped complaining the moment that the two began fighting each other. Now, they were cheering loudly at how fierce the two of them were fighting. Jack narrowed his eyes as he looked at the fight that was going on through the screen in the locker room. Although others couldn't see it clearly, Jack could do that easily. From the moment that the two had been staring at each other, Jack became keen and began observing their movements. He could see that the two of them seemed to be communicating with each other. It was only after one of them consigned that the two began fighting. Immediately, Jack knew that it seemed that the scheme was still in progress. So, his eyes keenly observed the movements of the two. Then, he noticed another thing, that was the fact that, although the two of them seemed to be fighting intensely, in reality, they were actually pulling their punches in the last moment. Furthermore, he could see that they would even ignore the openings that could be used to deal a critical damage to the opponent. Upon seeing this, Jack immediately confirmed that the scheme was still in progress. But what was the other part of the scheme? Jack could already guess it. As the fight went on, Vulture fell into a disadvantage. Then, he made a mistake and Mad Lion took the chance and kicked him on the chest. Followed by that, he rapidly rushed towards him and threw another punch before Vulture could stabilize himself. In the end, since Vulture was closer to the edge of the ring, he was forced to fall out of the ring. The moment that this happened, loud cheers erupted in the arena. In the eyes of the crowd, although it was humiliating to be defeated by being thrown out of the ring, that could be forgotten as long as you had given a good fight. They'll just say that you were unlucky, that's all. But in Jack's eyes, everything was crystal clear. As a professional combatant, he could already see what was happening. From the movements of the two, Jack could tell that this wasn't the first time that they were performing instead of fighting. The end of this fight came without any of the two sustaining any serious injuries. As for kicking Vulture out of the ring, he could see that the two were moving towards the edge of the ring deliberately. With their fighting experience, there were some things that they would definitely not ignore. How could they ignore the fact that they would lose the match as long as they fell off the ring? So, each and every fighter always made sure to move away from the edge of the ring even if they had to suffer an attack. At least even with that injury, they still had a chance of winning the match. On the other hand, as long as they were kicked out of the ring, the match was over. The closer they were to the edge of the ring, the higher the chances they had to lose the match. Jack simply shook his head at the thought of this. Although the two had a high level, in front of him, they were no different from rookies. Additionally, it seemed that he'd been expecting so much from Mad Lion. Although his punches were pulled at the last moment, Jack could see that they were starting at full power. In other words, he attacked with full power but made a mistake that would make it possible for Vulture to escape. Just like that, although the two of them had cheated in this match, instead of their reputation being ruined, their reputation soared into the air as the new fans that were seeing them for the first time immediately joined their fan clubs. After the match, there was 30 minutes of wait. And Jack could see that this was another part of the scheme. This was going to give Scarred Tiger enough time to recover and reach his peak condition before the fight. In the quarterfinals, Scarred Tiger had only spent his energy while dealing with the three others. In the end, he didn't suffer many injuries. And during the fight between Mad Lion and Vulture, although they had already decided on who was going to win, they still fought for over 20 minutes. All this while plus the extra 30 minutes, Scarred Tiger, who had only suffered from little exhaustion, would have recovered fully. These scheming people were indeed thorough in their plans. It's just that all the schemes were nothing in front of absolute strength. And Jack had absolute strength when matched against these three and their mastermind. After 30 minutes, Jack and Scarred Tiger the ring. And the moment that they saw Jack, who was wearing white tracksuit and the silver mask on his face, they erupted in cheers. How could they not recognize Jack after he had instantly defeated his previous opponents? Now, they had already formed a fan club for him. What was boosting the morale and thrill of the spectating crowd was the fact that Jack was still a newcomer to the arena, the current Black Horse. And although his body was small, His strength couldn't be measured with his body size, as his previous opponents could bear witness to that. Is that the guy that you were talking about? Yeah, he's calling himself J.K. Silver. I think Edwin knows him. Why does it look like he's a youth? He's a youth. I don't think that he's over 20 yet. Seriously? I can't wait for his performance in this match. The big bosses were all anticipating what was going to happen next and couldn't help but get impatient that the gong wasn't ringing yet. Of course, they were only anticipating to see how strong Jack really was. Gong. With the sound of the gong, the second round of the semi-finals finally began under the gazes of thousands of pairs of eyes. A few moments before the gong rang, Scarred Tiger looked at Jack, who was standing in front of him, and sneered as he looked at him. It looks like you're so unlucky that the heavens said that you have to be punished by me. Now, here we are. Are you going to surrender, or do you want to make you do so? Scarred Tiger looked at Jack before continuing. But, I'll have to warn you. I'm not that good at making others surrender, as I may end up making you leave the ring with a few broken bones or as a corpse. Jack didn't know if he was supposed to laugh at this guy or not, but he could at least get the gist of what was happening here. Although Scarred Tiger was hired by Austin to make sure that Jack lost the match, he still wouldn't easily let go off of the chance to have a shot at the title as this month's champion. Being a champion here had some benefits that could make people want to do their best to win the title. But it wasn't easy to become a champion, as almost every factor here favored the defending champion. What Jack didn't know was that the reason as to why they decided on this form of competition was because they wanted the top three to be the champions. These three were already loyal to the arena, and so there was no loss in giving them some benefits. The benefits here were so big in that as long as these champions were given a taste of it, they would surely want to do all they could to maintain it. On the other hand, there were situations like Mad Lion and Vultures. Theirs was that they were in the same gang and had been fighting together since years ago. They had also been sparring with each other, and as a result, they were familiar with each other. As for the championship, they always made sure that they exchanged it between themselves so that each of them would get a share. Today was the exception. The reason for the exception was that they were facing Jack, and he seemed to be a tough opponent. Between the two, Mad Lion was the strongest and had the highest chance of winning. So, when Austin approached them, they agreed, as that was still the same thing that they were going to do anyway. Jack saw that this guy spoke too much nonsense and decided that he would simply end this match as fast as he could. There was no need for him to speak so much. He wanted to get his rewards and get out of this place to deal with other things. If he got more cash, he would definitely make sure that safety enforcers expanded rapidly, even if he had to purchase the other security companies. On the other hand, the grocery department only needed the supplies and the stores. As he again reached this point in thinking, he remembered that there was someone that was trying to cause Celine some problems. So, if he could get back earlier, it won't hurt as well. Jack was immersed in his thoughts in that, for a moment, he had forgotten that he was in a fight. And the moment that Scarred Tiger saw that Jack didn't even seem to care about his presence, he immediately decided that he would kill Jack. At worst, he would make sure that he'd crippled him. Although Jack's strength in the preliminaries had showed him that Jack was strong, he still thought that he was stronger than him. So, he had already began fantasizing about how he was going to get rewarded after winning the match. Gong. The moment that the gong rang, Scarred Tiger didn't care whether Jack was paying attention or not, and launched himself forward, ready to strike. His fist carried a lot of power, as at this time, Scarred Tiger didn't dare to hold anything back. If he could end this without suffering any injuries, he would have a shot at winning the championship, as he would only have to deal with Mad Lion. In the end, he would not only win the championship, but the rewards that had been promised to him by Austin would be a cream on the top. Although Jack lost focus for a moment, with his current level, there was no way that he could fail to feel the approaching attack. His unfocused eyes immediately turned sharp as he looked at the approaching fist. Not intending to dodge at all, Jack's right hand curled into a fist. Then, as soon as Scarred Tiger's fist came before his face, Jack used his left hand to parry it to the side before throwing the right fist right towards Scarred Tiger's face. Since he had planned on attacking his face, Jack would reciprocate. On the other hand, he would have so loved to beat this guy slowly, but when he thought about Celine, he suddenly changed his mind. Seeing that his attack was easily parried away, Scarred Tiger was surprised. Then, he hurriedly tried retracting his hand, but the speed and force at which he launched himself forward didn't allow him to stop immediately. So, he could only helplessly raise his other hand to try blocking Jack's other punch. But his reaction speed was far slower than Jack's speed. As a result, Jack's fist connected with his left side of the face. At this moment, Scarred Tiger felt like he'd been hit by a truck. Although he always allowed others to hit him so that he could deal damage in return, this time, there was no chance in retaliating, as the pain of having his jaw being dislocated as well as losing a few teeth was immense that it forced him to black out. The unconscious Scarred Tiger did a flip and fell face first on the ring. It wasn't much, with the speed at which he charged with towards Jack, plus having his body slightly elevated from the ground. It wasn't hard for the force behind Jack's punch to make him do a 270 degrees flip. The cheers that had just erupted with anticipation for a good fight immediately died down. No word could be spoken as they stared at Jack and Scarred Tiger in the ring without knowing how to react. None of them had seen this coming. They knew that Scarred Tiger was a good fighter, and although Jack had shown good fighting prowess the previous day, they expected that the fight would surely last a few minutes before the winner was decided. Now, they had just seen their expectations being overturned. Not to mention a minute, the fight had ended within 5 seconds. And these 5 seconds were the ones that Scarred Tiger used to rush towards Jack and the time that he was being punched. Jack had expected that such a situation would occur as it had already happened a few times before. With his current strength having been increased by 4 times that of an adult male, there was no doubt that he could easily deal with someone like Scarred Tiger easily. He looked at the host who had his mouth agape and spoke, "Can the finals begin now? I'm getting a little impatient." Coming out of his daze, the host was a little incoherent before he caught what Jack was implying. He first shouted the results. Scarred Tiger has been knocked unconscious. So, there's no need to count to 10 dash. Bam. Thud. Before he finished, he simply heard the sound of something being hit before falling onto the ground like a sack of potatoes. Looking at the source of the sound, he found that Scarred Tiger had been kicked out of the ring. He swallowed hard before continuing, and the winner of this round is J.K. Silver. As for the finals, if it can continue right away, or we'll have to wait for 30 minutes, that's going to depend on the opponent. As soon as the host finished speaking, the crowd immediately began cheering. Of course, that only applied to those that had placed a bet on Jack, or those that hadn't placed a bet at all. Then the crowd began shouting for the fight to continue. They wanted to see what was going to happen when Jack faced Mad Lion and absolutely forgot that Mad Lion was supposed to be resting. Fight! 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 As soon as they began, the whole arena erupted with the spectators requesting for the fight to continue immediately. So, even though Mad Lion wanted to take a moment and analyze Jack's strength, for his reputation as a defending champion, there was no way that he could show any weakness. So, he got to his feet and headed to the ring. The moment that he stepped forward, the cheers became even louder. Mad Lion's appearance was the same as his agreement to the fight continuing immediately. When he got onto the ring, Jack didn't speak a word and waited for 5 minutes for bets to be placed. Mad Lion spoke no word as well as he simply focused his gaze on Jack, as if he was trying to find the secrets that were hiding inside Jack's body. Too bad that there was nothing that he could discover at all. The moment that the gong rang, Mad Lion made the first move. Since his body wasn't bulky, his movements were fast. But, this time, Jack could see that his movements were clearly faster than when he was fighting against Vulture. It was obvious that he was going all out from the start. Jack didn't care much about it, as he also moved forward to attack as well. His speed was far faster than Mad Lion's. Mad Lion, who was charging forward crazily, immediately felt that there was something wrong at this moment. But it was too late to react. With the two charging towards each other from opposite sides, they approached each other faster. Jack threw a punch, and since his movements were unexpected, and he had used more than 50% of his full speed, Mad Lion had no chance of resisting at all.
Bang!
Mad Lion was thrown backwards by the sheer force from Jack's fist. The moment that he landed onto the ground, he had already fallen unconscious. There was silence dominating the whole arena for the second time of the night. The matches today, none of them went according to the expectations of others. In the VIP room, there was silence for a moment before a loud roar of laughter echoed and spread in the whole room. Edwin held his stomach as he looked at the pale-faced Austin sitting not far from him. Then, after a moment, he sneered at Austin as he chuckled. You made so many arrangements and schemes. In the end, you lost. You still lost after all the planning. Hee hee, that's to be expected from a person like you who doesn't know his own limit. Edwin held his stomach as he looked at the pale-faced Austin sitting not far from him. Then, after a moment, he sneered at Austin as he chuckled. You made so many arrangements and schemes. In the end, you lost. You still lost after all the planning. Hee hee, that's to be expected from a person like you who doesn't know his own limit. Austin was currently pale and didn't know what to do at this moment. There was a fact that all of his wealth was going to be taken away at this time. Although it was only 90% of all of his wealth, if he was left with only 10% of his current wealth, not only would his status drop, in fact, the enemies that have always been eyeing him would surely strike. What's more is that, since he would no longer be rich as he was before, many of the relationships that he'd created through his wealth would be broken. The relationships that were formed on the base of benefits wouldn't survive if the benefits disappeared. He tried thinking his way out of the situation, but he found that there was nothing that he could do at all. Had it been a simple bet between the two of them, he could have acted shamelessly and refused to fulfill his end of the bet. But, at this moment, he really wanted to go back in time and slap the silly him back then. Not the one that had suggested that they had to register their bet and make it official. Instead, it was the him that had accepted the bet. Jack had come forward and proposed the bet. On the other hand, with his usual arrogance, he didn't think much of it and agreed to it. Furthermore, when Jack obviously pretended that the stake was too high, he raised his own stake while reducing Jack's. He was now wondering how foolish he was at that time. He'd clearly seen that Edwin was so respectful to Jack, and he treated him as a peer and maybe someone at a higher level. And him, just to make sure that he dominated Edwin, he had provoked Jack, who was minding his own business. Jack had not interfered when he was arguing with Edwin and simply stood out of the issue, but he had brought him into it himself. But now, no matter how regretted what had happened before, he knew there was nothing that could be done. The owner of the arena was someone that had a good relationship with several people, and he himself was a great power. The moment that they made the bet official, it was the moment that he'd agreed that if he lost, he would lose whatever he'd placed as the stake. No matter if he wanted to give the stake by himself or not, they would surely hand over everything that he'd lost to Jack. The reason for this was the connections. Using their connections that spread to the government, they could easily make his own wealth to be transferred. He wanted to laugh at himself. He had simply thought that he'd made sure that Jack wouldn't lose and fail to fulfill his end of the bet. Who knew that he was setting himself up? Jack didn't want to idle here any longer and decided to leave the ring after the host announced that he was the champion. There was nothing like a belt and whatever. The spectating crowd were the witnesses that he was the winner of this championship. As soon as he changed his clothes, he met with Edwin, who was waiting for him at the entrance of the locker room. Ha ha ha, Mr. Jack, you surely live up to my expectations. But I should say that you're more than I had thought of you. In other words, I had underestimated you by a great margin. Edwin laughed as he looked at Jack. Although he himself was a rich person, he had no power to completely make Austin poor. No, it should be that, although he had the strength to do that, he would surely suffer a great loss if he dared to try eliminating Austin. And he wasn't ready to risk something like that. And this was the exact reason as to why he decided to shift into another industry as soon as he got the chance to do that. It wasn't that he was a coward, he was just going for a retreat, and it wouldn't be late for him to deal with Austin after he succeeded. Now, he didn't need to lift a finger, and Austin was dealt with. Furthermore, it was the trap that he dug himself. It was the one that had now trapped him, intending to end his life. He would just sit at the side and laugh at him for his failure. With the way that Austin operated, it was obvious that he had a big bunch of enemies that wanted to see him down. With only 10% of his wealth left alongside the relationships that were bound to be broken, Austin would be no less than a beggar within a month. It wasn't that he didn't have debts on him, and the 10% that he had left would surely not be enough to repay the debts. The result was definitely going bankrupt. Hee hee, you flutter me, Mr. Edwin. Jack smiled. This time, it wasn't his usual shallow smile, but a genuine one. He was in a good mood at this moment because the rewards of winning the championship had already began pouring in. System task completed. Professional combatant ability now permanently belongs to the host. That's right, he'd finished the task earlier. He'd been given 7 days, but he'd completed it within 3. Now, he didn't have to stress himself over something like not completing the task and receiving the system's punishment. Seeing Jack's genuine smile, Edwin was even more thrilled and his good mood soared through the roof. "Mr. Jack, let me take you so that you can receive your rewards," Edwin said enthusiastically. He couldn't help but want to see how Austin was going to be stripped off of his wealth one after the other. Jack nodded and followed Edwin towards the management area of the arena. There, he found Calvin, who was already expecting his arrival. Jack also found that Austin was also present at that moment. Jack's brows rose a little when he saw that there were a few bruises on Austin's face. And it wouldn't take a genius to know that he'd been in a fight. As for who he had fought against, Jack wasn't sure and neither was he interested. After sitting, Calvin began. "Congratulations, Mr. Jack, for being the champion of this championship. As a reward, you'll receive $50 million. Hearing that, Jack couldn't help but be surprised. It seemed that the rewards here were generous as compared to the ones that came from car racing. It was just that in racing, as long as one was careful, there would be little to no risk of getting into an accident that might be fatal. On the other hand, in the ring, one could have a few broken bones and might end up dead if he wasn't careful. If you had no skill and strength, you were bound to be beaten up." Buzz. His phone vibrated. And at the same time, Calvin continued, "We have transferred the $50 million to your account just now. I believe it has already arrived by now?" Jack nodded in response. There was no need to take out his phone as he could already see the system prompt that showed him that it was indeed true that he'd received what he deserved. "You've earned $50 million. Multiplier applied. You've received $5 billion. First income. As a reward, you gain a recipe of body strengthening pill. Body strengthening pill. A pill that helps in development of a person's physical strength. At most, one can take 2 pills. The effect would be that in less than a week of training, a person's strength would rise by 2 times that of an adult male." Jack was surprised that he was given a recipe for the pill instead of the pill itself. But he was happy because he could produce a few more pills that could be used to enhance the strength of others that he deemed worthy. He would have so loved to ask the system about the reward, but Calvin continued talking at this moment. "And this is the transfer agreement. Once you sign this contract, you'll be agreeing to receive 88% of Austin's wealth. This is the bet that you two made. The 2% is the fee that's charged by us to ensure that the bet is fulfilled," Calvin said as he handed Jack a form. Jack took it and read it thoroughly. He found that there was a government official's signature and stamp proving that the document was legal. He couldn't help but get amazed at how fast the arena was at getting something like this. In any case, Jack didn't care and signed the agreement as soon as he saw that there were no problems with the statements there. The moment that he finished putting his signature on it, a barrage of system prompts appeared in his vision. "You've earned $700 million. Multiplier applied. You receive $70 billion. You've received 2 sports cars, 1 SUV, and a limousine. Multiplier applied. Merging applied. You receive a Boeing 787-8 BBJ. You've received Amber Securities. Multiplier applied. You receive Good Vision Security Limited. You've received 3 mansions and 1 villa. Multiplier applied. Merging applied. You received the Serenity Residential Area. You've received 7% shares of Ambition Research Institute. Multiplier applied. You receive 51% shares of Brightway Medical Research Center. You've received a laptop, a pin, 30 pieces of male underwear, 3 boxes of tissue paper, 20 pairs of suits. It is detected that they may no meet the host's taste. Changed into cash. You've received $321,548,000. Multiplier applied. You receive $32,154,800,000. You've received 1 slave, Ayush. Multiplier applied. You receive a servant, nameless. You can assign the name. Limit to the multiplier on the wealth earned from betting has been reached. For future application of the multiplier on incomes from bets, Host needs to upgrade the system to level 2. With the last prompt, Jack's phone that was inside his pocket vibrated endlessly. Now, Jack finally understood the power of the system. Jack couldn't believe that he'd just received all of these rewards at this moment. Wasn't he filthy rich now? More than the Alfonso family, right? Looking at the prompts that had appeared in front of his vision, Jack almost laughed out loud in ecstasy when he was suddenly brought back to reality by Calvin's voice. "Mr. Jack, is there a problem with the agreement?" Calvin asked. The way that he treated Jack was obviously better than he had ever treated the others. Not only was Jack's ability in fighting high, but his background was also something that they failed to grasp. They had been planning on doing the same thing as the one that they did to Austin, getting the amount of his wealth that would be able to match with the 45% of Austin's 90%. In the end, other than the information that Jack had bought the Safety Enforcers security company, they only found that he was a member of Crystal City's Alfonso family. But, according to the information that they had gotten, Jack wasn't favored in the family and was in fact expelled from the family, and they were only trying to pull him back into the family recently. If this was all of Jack's information about his background, then Calvin could say that it was nothing. But the fact that Jack had used his money to buy the company and had already began grocery chain stores in Inchoate City proved that he had cash. And all the money that he had spent till this moment was definitely more than $5 billion. Something that he was sure that Alfonso family couldn't fork out at a short time and give it to Jack, who wasn't the favored one. The conclusion that they had come to was the fact that Jack had another secret background that even they couldn't investigate. They had tried looking into his accounts, but for some reason, they couldn't access the information about his account statements. Not at all, Mr. Calvin. Jack shook his head. There was no way that he was going to tell him that he'd just gotten rich, right? Although there were things that still needed him to complete other procedures to obtain them, Jack already owned 88% of Austin's property. Although he didn't have full control of them, still, they were counted as his property by the system. That meant that if he signed the shares transfer agreement with Ben, he would definitely have the rewards coming. As of now, there was nothing that proved that he owned the shares that were in Ben's hand, and that was the exact reason as to why they hadn't been multiplied yet. "I have a request to make, Mr. Calvin. I don't know if you can help me with it?" Jack thought of something and asked. "It depends on if I have the ability to help you or not." Calvin replied with a smile. Jack nodded and said, "Can you help me sell all the assets that I've gotten from Mr. Austin here apart from the company and the shares?" Calvin, Edwin, and Austin all had their mouths agape. They couldn't believe what they were hearing. Jack had only gotten hold of the assets, and he was already selling them? Wasn't that a bit rushed, or was it that he cared not about them? Austin was obviously not only stunned, but he was also angered. Jack asking for the wealth that had been gotten from him to be sold in front of him was no different from a taunt. But all the same, he knew that there was nothing that he could do at this moment. Not only was he no longer rich, Jack's own strength was enough to prove that he wasn't someone that he could handle at his peak, not to mention now that he was at his lowest point. Of course, it won't be for free. After selling them, you can get 10% of the income as commission. What do you think? Jack stated as he ignored their surprised gazes. Calvin came back to his senses and replied, "Okay then, I will make sure that you get the most out of the assets." Jack shook his head and said, "I don't want to wait for a long time. Just sell everything at the market price. Or, you can buy them from me at a market price and decide to sell them at a bigger profit later." Austin's mouth opened for a moment before he closed it without saying a word. He currently had the bruises on his face due to the fact that he'd interfered with the way that the matches were supposed to be and caused the arena big losses when people stopped betting. Now, he was sure that as long as he said another contradictory word, he would definitely suffer a broken limb, or maybe he may end up dead. In the eyes of the arena's owner, he was nothing at all. Calvin came to an agreement and said that he would transfer the money to Jack's account the following day. It was obvious that he was going to buy the assets that Jack intended to sell. Jack then left with Edwin. But he was currently impatient to get to the hotel so that he could finally look at the rewards that he'd received. He still had a few questions that he still needed to ask the system. Edwin, who was in a good mood, drove the car slowly in that Jack had no choice but to ask him to let him, Jack, to drive. The moment that he held the steering wheel, the car charged forward on the highway heading towards Cheetah Hotel. Edwin wasn't prepared for the sudden increase in speed, and was forced to lean back on the seat with his feet almost rising into the air. Not long after they arrived at Cheetah Hotel and Jack bid goodbye to Edwin, he hurried towards his room. On the way there, he met with Wendy and Angie, but he completely ignored them as if he hadn't seen them and headed to his room. The moment that he got into the room, he began looking at the prompts once again. You've earned $700 million. Multiplier applied. You received $70 billion. You've received 2 sports cars, 1 SUV, and a limousine. Multiplier applied. Merging applied. You receive a Boeing 787-8 BBJ. You've received Amber Securities. Multiplier applied. You receive Good Vision Security Limited. You've received 3 mansions and 1 villa. Multiplier applied. Merging applied. You received the Serenity Residential Area. You've received 7% shares of Ambition Research Institute. Multiplier applied. You receive 51% shares of Brightway Medical Research Center. You've received a laptop, a pin, 30 pieces of male underwear, 3 boxes of tissue paper, 20 pairs of suits. It is detected that they may no meet the host's taste. Changed into cash. You've received $321,548,000. Multiplier applied. You receive $32,154,800,000. You've received 1 slave, Ayush. Multiplier applied. You receive a servant, nameless. You can assign the name. Limit to the multiplier on the wealth earned from betting has been reached. For future application of the multiplier, host needs to upgrade the system to level 2. The next thing that he did was to take out his phone to check the balance in his account. Flyer's bank savings account balance is $111,164,670,000. Now, he had more than $111 billion in his account, and it was enough for him to upgrade the level of his card. Then, he began following the prompts one after the other. He took out his laptop and placed it on the table before connecting it to the Wi-Fi of the hotel, ready to search for the information of anything that he didn't know about. The first thing that he searched about was definitely Boeing 787-8 BBJ. He found that this was a luxurious business private jet. It was worth at least $2 billion. When Jack saw the information about it, he was shocked to the extent that he didn't know what to say. In other words, just this private jet made him have a net worth of $2 billion. And that was just the start. Amber Securities was the company that was owned by Austin, the one that was competing against safety enforcers as their headquarters were located in the same city. Its worth was slightly below safety enforcers by a few $100 million. Looking at this, Jack smiled. It seemed that he could as well just merge the 2 companies and bring up a bigger one. But that would have to wait for a moment because there was a company that he'd gotten after the multiplier was applied. Good Vision Security Limited. This was a popular security company in the country. It was by a far margin bigger than Safety Enforcers and Amber Securities. Its worth was almost $300 billion. The reason for that was because it was mainly based in the capital city. The resources and other things that the company possessed were mainly focused in the capital and central province. As for the other provinces like the Western Province, the ones that operated there were the smaller branches that were almost ignored by the headquarters. Jack took a deep breath as he looked at the information about the company. From what he could tell, Amber Securities was worth $3.1 billion, or slightly more. If the value was multiplied by 100 times, it brought the value to almost $300 billion. This was now what was called the increase in quality. Unlike where he would be given 100 Amber Securities, he was given one that had a higher value. Serenity Residential Area was a residential area that had several luxurious villas. It was located in the capital city, just like the headquarters of Good Vision Security Limited. There were a total of 30 villas, and the cheapest amongst them was worth $200 million. The total estimated value of the residential area was at $38 billion. Jack himself was wondering just how luxurious the villas in this residential area were for them to be this expensive. Then, there was the 7% shares of Ambition Research Institute. This research institute was a small research center that dealt with researching on pharmaceuticals. It was located in Venture City. On the other hand, the Brightway Medical Research Center that he'd just become the biggest shareholder was a middle-sized medical field research center in the Central Province. Although it wasn't the biggest in the country, Its achievements in the medical field were not to be underestimated at all. His 51% was worth at least $42 billion. In other words, the whole institution was worth at least $106 billion. As for the reward where he was almost rewarded with Austin's pairs of underwear, Jack was grateful that the system had decided to check the value of these items in terms of cash. Now, he turned his gaze to something that told him that the system was indeed so powerful. The last thing that he'd earned from his bet with Austin. You've received one slave, Ayush. Multiplier applied. You receive a servant, nameless. You can assign the name. Angel, how do I claim this reward? Jack asked. All the rewards that he'd received were either parked somewhere or they were in the transfer process. But, for the slave, this person that was called Ayush was definitely someone that was under Austin. As for why he was a slave during this era, Jack wasn't sure about that. First thing first, the slave that was originally Austin's has become yours. With the help of the system, his loyalty towards you has been maximized. As for the second one, you'll have to give the name first. When Jack heard this, he was amazed by the system's power. It even had the power to influence a person's loyalty towards him. And now, he didn't know a thing about this Ayush, and he wasn't sure on how he was going to contact him. But in any case, he would just deal with what could be dealt with at the moment and leave the others for later. So, he decided on choosing the name of the servant that the system was going to give him. After thinking for a long while, he suddenly remembered that he didn't know the gender of the servant. So, how was he going to assign the name? Give a male servant the name Joy? Or give a female servant the name Reuben? No, that won't happen at all. Angel, what's the gender of the servant? Male or female? Jack asked. The gender of the servant depends on the name that you'll give. Jack thought for a moment before he decided on Denali. And immediately after he gave the name, there was a knock at the door. Jack frowned for a moment, wondering who it was that had come to disturb him. Was it Wendy? He wasn't sure, but he hoped that she wasn't the one that had just knocked at the door. He grumpily got onto his feet and headed towards the door. When he opened it, he found that there was a lady in a business suit standing there. She was a beauty with a rating of about 94. As for her age, he could guess that she was in her 20s. Yes? After a moment, Jack asked. Master, I'm Denali. I'm here to report to duty. Do you have any instructions for me? The lady asked with a charming smile. Jack was both surprised and flabbergasted. This lady was the one that the system had brought over? He thought that he wanted a man. How come it was a lady now? You sure know how to choose names. Denali is a unisex name. So, it was like you told the system to randomize the gender of the servant. And since you have no girlfriend, maybe the system thought that it could help you get someone that could keep you company. Angel's words made Jack speechless. Denali was a unisex name? Why didn't he know about that? This was the first time that he heard that the name was unisex. And, you decided that you can bring the lady over? It's not like I'm not charming enough to get myself a lady. I'm not just looking for them. Jack couldn't help but retort in his mind. The lady in front of you was chosen from all the females of this world with the name Denali. She has her own background in life. But, the system has made her loyal to you, just like how Ayush is towards you. Furthermore, according to the memories inserted into her mind, she was supposed to be your servant, and she had come here on this day to report for work. Those that know about her have had their memories altered, and they think the same way. Her character completely matches the person that you deem competent to work for you. As for her abilities, you'll be given the option to decide on, and just like how you got the skills, they will be merged into her. To her, it will be known that she had undergone special training somewhere to gain those skills. But, you'll have to note that there's a limit of 5 choices in which the servant can focus on. In other words, 5 professions, and that's all. Jack thought for a moment, and remembered that the lady was still waiting for his reply. So, he focused his gaze on her and said, Not for now, you can come in. I'll tell you if there's anything that'll need you to do. Yes, master. Denali replied before following Jack into the suite. What Jack didn't know was that, at that moment, when he invited Denali into the suite, Angie happened to see it. As such, She was angry that Jack, who was supposedly engaged to her friend, was taking a lady in the hotel. Furthermore, he had done that in the same hotel as the one that his fiancée was in. Wasn't this blatant disrespect of the ties that they shared? R. After letting Denali sit, Jack began thinking about what the system had said. He looked at Denali. He could see that she behaved normally, as if she was indeed supposed to be here and had not just appeared in front of the door. What level of power was this? To think that the lady in front of him was actually a selected from all the ladies with the name Denali in the world. Even though the system had already told him that, he still couldn't believe it. This level of power is obviously from out of the blue planet. So, don't think much of it. Jack nodded and decided to focus on what he could at this moment. What professions should I choose? Jack asked himself. It was only for a moment before he got one of them. That was going to be business management. If she could help him deal with some of the businesses that he's going to own in the future, then it would be better. In the future, he's going to own more and more businesses and might be kept busy. As such, he didn't want to put his mind into managing the businesses under him in that he forgets that there was a life that he had to live. System, I want the first profession to be business management. Jack said. Immediately. Done. Jack looked at Denali, who was still seated on the coach without any changes. There was no any special effects. He was now doubtful in this situation. No need to worry about it. You can simply ask her about it, and you'll know. Denali, do you have any special skills that can enable you to work well in business management? Jack asked as he looked at Denali. Yes, master. Everything about business management was taught to me during the special training that I underwent since I was young. As for the skills, I have the ability to determine the loyalty of the subordinates. In other words, all the subordinates that I can hire will definitely not be traitorous.
Denali replied.
As long as there's a chance that the person that I'm about to hire will be a traitor in the future, I will be able to know. But there are situations that cannot be controlled. For example, if that person's family is threatened and he has no choice but to betray the company. Denali continued. Jack nodded. In this way, they could get some trustworthy subordinates. Perhaps they could start not long from now with the companies that were under him at the moment. Jack thought for a moment and decided that he would let her deal with the security companies that were currently supposed to be merged into one. The one that was going to be the main one was obviously the Good Vision Security Limited. Second, she must have the strength to beat up those that dared to make a move on her. She was a beauty. So, there would always be those that had ulterior motives. As he thought of that, he made the decision that her second profession would be an all-round combatant. In other words, she could use her physical body in attacking and could use the guns and so on. Let the second one be the all-round professional combat skills. Jack said. Jack's professional combatant was an ability. As for Denali's, that was a skill. Immediately. Done. Thinking for a moment, he wondered, can she drive? Not at all. Remember, other than the basics that a person should know, her skills are almost blank. Driving, flying a plane, and all the other means used for transportation are combined into a single profession, RASR, which means that no matter if it is the road, railway, sea, or air, there's no means of transport that she doesn't know how to use. Jack's jaw dropped when he heard this. He wondered why he himself hadn't gotten that kind of skill yet. You can't master all the skills available in the world with that level of IQ of yours. Jack. After taking a deep breath, Jack decided on the third one to be RASR. As for the fourth one, it was a simple one. That was the information about the computers. She had to know how to operate computers, hacking, and other computer skills. So, the only thing that could fit that category was definitely the computer mastery. As for the fifth one, Jack thought for a long time but couldn't find any that fit that category. So, he decided to leave it aside for the moment. Furthermore, this spot could be used in the case of emergencies. Now, Jack looked at this new personal assistant of his. Not only was she a beauty, but her skills matched what was required of his assistant. Now, to the first task that he was going to give her, Denali, can you set up firewalls to protect my laptop there and to hide any information that can be hidden about me? Yes, master. Immediately after that, Denali took Jack's laptop that was still on the table and began typing at a rapid speed. Not long after that, codes began appearing on the screen. Of course, Jack understood some of them, but not a lot. He had learnt computer programming while in the university, but it was just the basics. Yes, master. Immediately after that, Denali took Jack's laptop that was still on the table and began typing at a rapid speed. Not long after that, codes began appearing on the screen. Of course, Jack understood some of them, but not a lot. He had learnt computer programming while in the university, but it was just the basics. Now as he looked at the codes that were appearing on the screen one after the other, Jack could finally understand the power of computer mastery. In just 5 minutes, Denali stopped typing the codes and looked at Jack. Master, it's all done. No matter who it is, I'm sure that they cannot pass the firewalls and steal the information that's in the laptop. As for the information about you, other than your name, nothing else can be found. The only way for them to know more information about you is to ask those that know you. Jack was impressed by Denali's skills. Now that one part was out of the way, it was time to deal with another. He thought of Ayush, whose loyalty towards him had been maximized. So, he asked, Denali, can you look for Ayush's information? If possible, I would like him to come here. Yes, master, Denali replied before she began typing on the laptop again. Jack gave some basic information like he was somehow linked to Austin and so on. He already knew Austin's contact information as he'd gotten it from the time that they were signing the contract in the arena. With his good memory, he of course remembered even though he didn't want to. And not long after that, Jack saw Ayush's information appearing on the screen. According to the information that Denali had collected, Ayush was currently 43 years old. He had a wife and 2 children. He had agreed to serve Austin wholeheartedly since the time that he asked Austin to save his daughter who had gotten sick at that time, and he had no money to treat her. Ayush had good skills in the business. But, due to the sickness of his daughter, the business collapsed due to lack of funds that were used on his daughter. After begging Austin for help, Austin only agreed to help after seeing that Ayush had good business skills. So, from that moment on, Ayush had been serving Austin. But, till this moment, Ayush's daughter hadn't gotten out of the hospital yet. After all, it wasn't easy to treat uremia. After that, Denali began typing again and managed to hack into the security cameras. And not long after that, she found where Ayush was currently. He was currently inside Amber Securities. He was the one that was managing it. Jack took Ayush's contact information and made a call. Hello, Ayush. Can you come to Cheetah Hotel at this moment? Yes, master. Although Ayush hadn't seen Jack before, his loyalty towards Jack being 100% made him easily recognize Jack. Jack ended the call and fell into deep thoughts for a moment. Then, looking at Denali, who was now sitting at the side, he asked, Can you help me analyze how long it can take for 3 security companies to be merged? No matter the amount of money that's required, just do the calculations. Yes, master, Denali replied before going silent for a moment as she looked at the information of the 3 companies. Then 5 minutes later, she began talking. From my estimations, it won't take more than a month to be able to merge the 3 security companies that are under master. With funds of about $10 billion, it should be enough to ensure that everything is in place at the fastest speed. This includes the improvement of the facilities, hiring new staff members, and other things that are necessary for a big company to be managed successfully. Denali stated. Jack nodded. Now the thing that he wanted to test was definitely the recipe for the body-strengthening pill. With this pill, he was sure that those that worked in his security company would definitely have a boost in their strength not long after they received 2 pills. But he himself was sure that he couldn't develop the pill. The first reason was due to the fact that he had no medical laboratory skills. The second one was the fact that he didn't have a place to do that. Wait. He suddenly remembered that he had gotten 51% shares of Brightway Medical Research Center. But if he released the pill recipe, being the fact that those that were in charge of the research center were not loyal to him, they would surely leak the recipe. Then again, if he dared to release the pill recipe and it was successfully created, he was sure that those shareholders that had the remaining 49% shares would benefit by doing nothing at all. So, Jack made a decision this time. He looked at Denali, who was now seated opposite him, and said, I would like you to help me get a team of 20 men that can be trusted in the security company. I want them to form a private security team. After pausing for a moment, Jack continued, I would like that team to be formed within this week. And after you're done with that, you can leave the issue about merging the security companies aside first and help me in acquiring the remaining 49% of Brightway Medical Research Center. And that should be completed within this month. Yes, master. Denali nodded. At this moment, Jack's phone rang. Looking at the unfamiliar number, Jack received it, and a lady's voice came through. Hello, Mr. Jackson. I'm the current CEO of Good Vision Security Limited, Tracy. Since you have purchased all the shares of the company, I was wondering if you have time to come and sign the document. Jack thought for a moment and said, I'll be there in 2 days. Or, if you can come to Venture City, it won't be a problem at all. Okay then, Mr. Jackson. I'll be coming to Venture City then. From the time of the flight, I should be there by tomorrow at 10. Tracy said, Okay then. I'll be waiting for you in Cheetah Hotel, Jack stated before hanging up. He said to Denali, You can get the team from Safety Enforcers as it's closer. And one more thing, you can help me in making sure that the money that I had handed over to Maxwell is well spent. They shouldn't save it. They should buy helicopters for emergencies if possible. Yes, master, Denali said before standing up to leave only to be stopped by Jack. You can do that tomorrow. Now is already nighttime. Just select one of the remaining 2 rooms and use it. Jack stated. Yes, master. Denali replied before heading into one of the rooms with Jack's laptop. She still had to do a little research on all the companies that Jack had acquired as well as their competitors. Not long after Denali left, Jack's phone rang again. Looking at the screen, he found that it was Ayush. Jack received the call and told Ayush to come to the suite that he was in. And after a few minutes, Ayush arrived. Looking at him, Jack could see that Ayush's temperament was almost similar to Grace's. It was just that his was masculine. Hello, master. Ayush gave Jack a bow before greeting. Jack nodded as he observed Ayush keenly. He was wondering if by completely loyal to him, Ayush was still a human or he was like a puppet. He's a human and will behave the same way that he should in normal occasions. It's just that he can never betray you and would be willing to die if you ask him to. Jack nodded as he welcomed Ayush into the suite. Ayush, I would like to ask about something here. How is the company that you were managing? Because I'm surprised that although it's already 8, you were still in office. Master, the company is good. It's just that the former boss was reckless and didn't like spending money. As a result, the company couldn't develop further than it was now. Furthermore, the employees there weren't treated well as long as they signed the contract. With the reputation of the current Amber Securities, it's no doubt that it can't defeat Safety Enforcers. Ayush said. From his tone, Jack could tell that he was depressed. And Jack could at least understand him a little bit. After all, if Ayush worked hard to make the company rise while on the other hand someone pulled it down, it was obvious that he could get depressed and frustrated considering the fact that the one that was causing all of this was the boss and at that time, his master. Jack thought about it and said, Ayush, I want you to make necessary changes to the company. I'll be merging Amber Securities with other 2 security companies. At that time, you can be in charge of the merged security company. I expect a lot from you. Ayush was excited when Jack mentioned about leaving the changes to him, as well as being promoted in the future. This made him stand up and give Jack another deep bow. Master, I thank you for this opportunity and trust. I will make sure that I live up to your expectations. Okay then, you can go back home. The changes can be made tomorrow. Jack nodded. After thanking Jack once again, Ayush finally left. Jack had decided to let Ayush oversee the security industry sector. Since he couldn't betray him, Jack could give him a few more benefits, and there was no need for him to worry about something going wrong. In any case, Ayush was not only loyal to him, but he was also capable enough. Otherwise, why would Austin want him to be his slave, someone that ran the company for him? Upon seeing that everything was up for the night, Jack went back to his bedroom and slept after getting food that Denali prepared before going back to her room.